Just a quick note before I start. If you have Kindle books through Amazon, starting February 26, 2025, the download and transfer via USB option will no longer be available. You can still send Kindle books to your Wi-Fi enabled devices by selecting deliver or remove from device option. So if you're the kind that likes to have a copy of your books on hand in case you're offline for some reason, some kind of emergency or just a failure of your internet or Wi-Fi or whatever, that won't be something that you've been able to do to download them directly to your computer after February 26th. So if you want to have those, it's not a hard copy, but if you want to have those copies available on a computer so that you can transfer them or possibly read them. I don't think I've ever read my Kindles on my computer, so I don't know if there's an app for that. But if you do want to do that, have it downloaded to your computer just to have a copy available to you in case Amazon goes down or something, you'll have to do that by February 26th, and you'll have to download them one at a time. So if you have an extensive Kindle library, you probably need to go ahead and get started. And now on with the show. Hello, I'm the Pink Phantom, and this is my podcast. Join me as I delve into the world of games and gaming, and especially old school RPGs. Together, let's voyage into the astral realm and check out my phantom thoughts. In this episode, a brief call-in from Evil Jeff. I delve into the eternal topic of what is an RPG, and of course, we go back to the world of the Dragon Slayers. So, one of the things that kind of triggered a notion, an idea, I'm not sure exactly what to call it, a concept, was I was listening to, I believe it was an episode of Analytic Dice podcast, and they were talking about the 2D20 system, and they were describing some of the mechanics. I've never played 2D20. I've never read 2D20. I don't own any 2D20 based RPGs, but they were describing the mechanics, and just part of my brain said that sounds very board gamey, and what I meant by that was that it was a very sort of rules-centric. It sounded like a very rules-centric way to play. You had to be aware of the rules and manipulating the rules and pushing all the buttons to get the results that you want versus some older style RPGs where where the idea is you describe what you want to do and the referee kind of decides what mechanics come into play, and they may tell you to roll a die or they may roll a die or what have you to see what happens. But a case where the players would be very aware of the rules. I think this is true of a lot of games where there is some kind of a meta currency. I think because that is part of the game that you have to be aware of to be successful within the game, to understand and really manipulate and interact with that kind of mechanic. D&D 3.5, third edition 3.5, I think is famous for being very kind of board gamey and have heavy mechanical involvement for players in terms of building a character, in terms of having ideas of what powers and feats, and if you want to take levels and other classes and things like that to get the exact kind of results that you want to be able to do exactly the thing you want. And it's a lot of ways like Euro game mechanics where there's these different moving parts or these different goals that you can have or different ways that you can achieve points or what have you, and you have to decide which of the mechanics you're going to pull from and put together to try to win the game. So that's why I was thinking, and I don't remember exactly what it was about the 2D20 system that they were describing that you had to be, that made me think of it as board gaming. And so that got me thinking a little more about RPGs in general and how we have these different views of playing, from very rules light, where you don't want to have a lot of mechanics, sort of weighing down the game. You want to have to be more free flowing and descriptive, and just make rulings where you need to, where you don't have specific rules that apply. You have what are often referred to as story games. I think of them more as quest-based games, where the players have decided that they're going to go down uh, a published adventure path, or they're going to chase down a specific goal with a lot of focus on that goal and not go in multiple different directions or be easily sidetracked. And so it would people who don't like that style of game would call it a railroad, because they're traveling basically along a more or less linear path. And while they do have choices, there's an end they're trying to reach, and eventually there's only going to be so many ways you can get to that one end. And then you have a more sandbox approach to gaming, where it's just a world is out there and things are moving and parts are moving, and there's different rumors and story hooks and things like that going around, and players can pick and choose where they go. And a lot of times they'll often have, in these types of games, there'll be mechanics that are downtime mechanics, and there'll be training for characters to advance. So players will have different characters, so that while these characters are locked up in travel or in training, they can continue to have adventure sessions with these other characters, not necessarily not optional, but these alternative characters. And what that got me thinking about was uh, board game based war games. Board game based war games have, usually come in a box, and for years and years and years, on a lot of these boxes, you will see, if you flip it over to the backside where it describes what the game is, there will be a little chart in the corner, and usually it will have a couple of things on it: complexity and solitaire suitability. Sometimes there'll be other things on it, maybe something like historicity, or how historical it is, or something like that. Seems like there's something else that's on there sometimes too, but the two that stand out are complexity and solitaire suitability. With It'll have a number or have an arrow on like a chart, essentially showing, yes, it's very solitaire suitable, it's not very solitaire suitable, it's moderate complexity, it's medium complexity, it's high complexity, it's low complexity. And I wonder if it's not time, because of the disparate ways of playing and the disparate types of goals and the disparate weight of mechanics that different RPGs have, to have something like that developed for RPGs. Now, there's not some central governing body on board game war games that said, we're going to do this, that standardized this practice. Just someone somewhere started doing it, and others thought it was a good idea. It was just another piece of information, as well as the description on that back of the box that told people what it was. So they could see from the description, it's about this point in history, it's about this battle, it's about this campaign, it's about this general, it's about this what have you, it's about this war. And then the more mechanical description of it is that little chart down in the corner. And I wonder if this would not be something that would be a good, better way for people who have experienced RPGs to sort of get a notion of whether they want a particular game or not, by telling them the focus of the game, the mechanical complexity, the how what kind of directionality it has, if it's freeform sandbox, if it's very specific, very quest oriented, if it's you could describe if it's, of course, the obvious ones would be, these would probably be more in the description on the back of a book, or a box or what have you, would be if it's a fantasy RPG or a Western, whatever. But a lot of that would be put up front. A lot of that information is available up front. It'll be on the cover, whether it's digital or in physical form, will tell you it's a fantasy RPG, or it's a Wild West RPG, or it's sci-fi, or it's science fantasy, or what have you. Or if it's a generic RPG, something along the lines of GURPS, that you're supposed to be able to make it. It could have, but you would have, maybe I think mechanical complexity would be one, or heaviness of mechanics. I don't know if that would be the proper term. It would have, is it an individual PC where it's where it's either a solo game, or it's a duet style game where there's a game master and one player, or is it a party of characters, or is it multiple characters per person? And then is it more of a combat heavy wargaming style RPG? Is it a more conversational relationship oriented RPG? Is it a more exploring a character's backstory, getting to know the characters through, whether it's through flashbacks or through adventures they're going through, or both, some relationship type of thing. It's a relationship RPG. Is it an RPG where you are playing people? Is it a relationship where you're playing objects? Is it even a tabletop RPG? Is it a conversational RPG where you're not going to have a lot of character sheet and dice and stuff in front of you, where it's more of a conversational RPG? Is it a LARP where you're acting things out? I think there's a lot of different sort of general categories that you could fill in with this kind of chart that would be useful for people who have played RPGs. It wouldn't be as useful for people new to the hobby, but that chart on the back of war games is not useful for people who are new to board game war games, because they don't know exactly what that means. And even to sometimes even within, complexity is kind of a relative term, and you can play anything solitaire if you work hard enough at it. But some things transition or have built-in mechanics for that already, so it's more easy to do it that way. But maybe you won't get as much out of it, especially if it's a multi-faction type war game where it helps to have 4 people playing the 4 different parts instead of having what they call a bot that's built into the game system that will play the parts where there aren't people. So that was just sort of a random series of ideas that crashed together in my brain that I've been thinking about lately and wanted to. I have a podcast, why not put them out there? So what do you think? Do you think that having a few categories, things that can be categorized, put on the bottom of the inside cover or on the outside cover or something of that of RPG books would be helpful for people who are already into RPGs? And for that matter, would it be a better stand-in for the what is an RPG, although that's more aimed at people who aren't well versed in RPGs? So it could be at the beginning of the book, you still have the what is an RPG discussion, or what is this RPG discussion, for people who aren't into RPGs. For people who are, they can just look at that back cover, and this gives them a general overview of what it's like mechanically, if nothing else. So if you have any ideas along this line or think I'm way off base, contact me. Contact info is in the show notes and at the end of the podcast.
Phantom, it's Evil Jeff. Just finished listening to your podcast with the Hexaday, the workbook from Third Kingdom Games. I'm glad you like it. It was one of those that I looked at and had thought about it and went back and forth a couple times and decided not to back it, mostly because of financial stuff, but knew that he would make it available again later on. I could grab it from him. But I'm glad to hear your review. That way I can get a better feeling for the whole product. I know that whole Kickstarter had changed from what it was originally. I think he was going to have like a calendar with a tear off thing once a day. And then he quickly changed that within like 2 days of putting it out the first time. But I'm glad somebody else finding good use out of Todd's stuff there from Third Kingdom Games. Keep it up.
Well, thank you, Jeff. I'm glad my little talk about the Hexaday calendar was useful for you. As a reminder for everyone, it is available from Third Kingdom Games, and there is a link in the show notes. And now, more from my solo AD&D RPG campaign, Tales of the Dragon Slayers. So the last time at the River Keep, the giants had sent an army of archers and infantry and light cavalry to flight. The group of second-level characters had attempted to stem the tide, but then they also tried to flee, but they were all killed by the giants, and the giants were pounding on the keep, trying to get in when the heavy cavalry came up the road. And so battle begins again. Roll for surprise. Is the cavalry surprised by the presence of the giants? No, on a 3. Are the giants surprised? On a 1, they are. There's one surprise segment. The cavalry closes and charges. There are a total of 5 cavalry plus their sergeant plus the captain, Captain Idle. So they charge into battle. So they will split up with Idle giving commands, 3 on one giant, 3 on the other giant, and Idle will take the third himself. He will take the male, and the others will split up on the 2 females. So 3 attacking, needing 17, but plus 2 because of the charge. And we have 1 hit. Is this against the giantess with the more hit points or less hit points? It is against the giantess with the more hit points, but she doesn't have that many left. And a heavy lance against a large creature is 3 to 18. So, breaking out some d6s here. That is sufficient. Doing 8 points of damage to a creature that only had 5 hit points. So the next group attacks the other female giant. And there's a 15 in there, so that's a hit. And she only had 2 hit points, so you don't have to roll the dice when you're rolling 3d6 to get 2 hit points. So that's the other giantess dies. So then Captain Idle charges. And he is going to need a 9 or better. He has plus 2 for charging, plus 2 for strength, and plus 2 from his battle axe, plus 2. So he's looking at needing a 3. And he rolls a 19. So the battle axe just does the 1d8, but he has plus 2 damage from the battle axe and plus 4 damage from his strength. So it's going to be plus 6 to this roll. And he does a total of 12 points of damage to the male giant. So now we go for initiative. The cavalry, a 1. The giants, a 2. The male giant strikes back, and he rolls a 14, which normally would be insufficient against Captain Idle's -3 armor class. However, Idle is at a disadvantage of 2 because of his charging. Actually, I believe he loses his dexterity roll, which is the same thing. So that is sufficient to hit. So that's going to be 2d8 points of damage. Does the giant hit the horse? High Idle, low horse. On a d6, he hits Idle. So he rolls 8 and 5. That's a total of 13 points. But Idle is still going. All right, next. And that's it for the giants. There's just 1 giant left standing. So the remaining horse. So first, Idle get another shot, a regular shot. He needs a 9, but he's still got. No, let's see here. Yeah, he needs 9, but his bonuses are down to +4, so he's not charging this time. He rolls an 18 with his battle axe. He probably should have used his lance instead of his battle axe, but he did not. 6 and 5 is 11. And then his horse will get to attack. His horse needs only a 12 to attack. 3 attacks because it's a heavy war horse. This giant is down to 1 hit point, so if any of these hits, the giant is done. 12 or more. A 1, a 5, and a 10. So now one of the other cavalrymen comes in. He rolls a 1. His horse. Well, let's see. That's the first round of combat for him against them, so the horse doesn't get to attack. But several others will get to attack because they can surround this giant. Let's see here. If he's turned around, if he's been banging on the door and he got turned around a little, only going to get 2 more on him because he's kind of cut off on the other side. The horse can't get around him. 2 more, so they both miss. So we move on to the next round with the cavalry rolling a 3 and the giant rolling a 3. So simultaneous. So we'll roll for the giant against Idle. A 9 is a miss. Captain Idle and 11 is a hit. And like I said, he was down to 1 hit point, so that giant is down. So the giants have been defeated at a fairly heavy cost. And that was 3 rounds, so he goes down just as the other heavy infantry come marching in from the other direction. So looking at the tale of battle, there were a total of 12 light crossbows killed, as well as a couple of heavy crossbows, a couple of light cavalry, 3 heavy infantry of the party's heavy infantry, I'm talking about the Dragon Slayer's party, and then the second level party, the fighter, the magic user, and the ranger were all killed, leaving only the cleric who's recuperating from near death himself alive. And that wraps up the battle between the hill giants and the garrison of the River Keep. The opening theme of this podcast was Strength of the Titans, and the closing music is Late Night Radio, both from Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. If you have any thoughts or feedback, you can get in touch with me by leaving me a voicemail on my Google Voice number, 864-209-1441. That's 864-209-1441. Or through SpeakPipe at www.speakpipe.com/Phantom Thoughts. That's www.speakpipe.com/Phantom Thoughts. Or you can send me a message or an audio file on Discord, where I can be found the Pink Phantom, or through email, phantomthoughtspodcast@gmail.com. That's phantomthoughtspodcast@gmail.com. I don't have to play or read your feedback on the podcast if that is not your preference. Just let me know.